in the footsteps of heroes. Battlefield tours by Leisure Holidays, sponsors of history.
During the first 4 years of the Second World War, the Royal Air Force were the principal weapon used against Nazi Germany. During that period, thousands of airmen were shot down and became prisoners of war. We begin our journey at one of the most difficult targets ever given to the Royal Air Force, the Great Dams of the Ruhr. At 12:30, in the early hours of the morning of the 17th of May 1943, Guy Gibson arrived here with his Dambusters and led them in the attack on the twin towers of the dam. The towers were the aiming point for the releasing of the weapons that would eventually destroy the dam itself. Of the 5 weapons released, just 2 hit the dam walling, creating enough damage to cause a huge wall of water to spread off down the valley and wiping out 1,200 civilians in the process. Flight Lieutenant Hopgood's plane was shot down during the attack on the Mona Dam. He delivered his weapon only to see it bounce over the dam wall into the compensating basin to destroy the power station here. And as he flew between the twin towers, he was shot at by the German gunners. His plane flew up the valley, crossing the little village to crash about 4 kilometers away. Flight Lieutenant Hopgood and 4 members of his crew were killed. They were brought to Rheinberg Cemetery, 90 miles away. Since being built in 1014, initially as a royal residence, Colditz Castle has become a hospital, a training area for Hitler Youth, but most famously as a prisoner of war camp for Allied prisoners during the war. Colditz became known to the Germans as the Bad Boys Camp. It was effectively a university of escape techniques, and through the course of the war, 300 escape attempts were made from Colditz, with 30 people getting back to their homelands successfully. One of the most famous British prisoners here in the senior officers block at the time was Douglas Bader. A persistent escaper in France, he was brought here because of that, but of course the physical nature of the castle meant that he was going to become a prisoner until 1945, when eventually the Americans liberated the castle as part of their drive east. Castles are designed to stop people getting in. They're not designed to stop people getting out. And several successful escapes were made across this courtyard, even though this is where the German guards were billeted. People climbed out through windows, people escaped through doors, even escaping through the guards' buildings themselves. One man actually had himself put into a Red Cross parcel and put out for posting back to his home address in England. Alongside British prisoners, we had prisoners from Holland, from France, from Belgium, and inside the chapel you'll find the remains of the French escape tunnel. The idea was to tunnel through the very walls of the castle itself to enable them to break out. And inside the chapel you'll find some of their tools that were used in their effort to tunnel out of here. Some of the cells still exist in the castle, one of which was occupied by Earl Haig's son, the man in charge of the British Army during the First World War, was serving with the British Army in North Africa when he was captured and brought here as a Prominente prisoner. The Prominentes were hostages, effectively, to be used in political situations by the Germans where they saw fit. Over the Polish border, on the outskirts of a town called Sagan, we come across, in a heavily wooded area, the remains of an infamous World War II prisoner of war camp. This is the camp known as Stalag Luft III. Famous in history for being the place where 80 men escaped, known as the Great Escape. The German Luftwaffe had been taking prisoners since late in 1939. And this is one of the camps that came out of the collection of Allied prisoners. Ostensibly, it was escape-proof. Specially constructed huts, sound equipment embedded in the earth, specially trained guards were all here to try and prevent, in 1944, some 10,500 inmates from getting out into the German countryside and perhaps getting home to England. The remains of the camp are quite easily found. We have the infirmary, we have the infamous cooler, we have several sets of remains of the actual huts themselves inside the prison camp. We also have, of course, Hut 104, the hut from where the Great Escape began, with men going down into the tunnel, which is actually laid out on the surface by a trench that now marks the place of the memorial to all of the men who actually took part in the escape, as well as to the prisoners who were held here by the German Luftwaffe. The lead up to the Great Escape, Tom, the original escape tunnel, was actually discovered by the Germans, and it was so close to Dick that they actually decided to close down both of them. Most of the focus then went into Harry. This is Harry, 30 feet deep, 334 feet long, the route taken by the 80 men who managed to get to the other end. Of the 80 men who reached the end of the tunnel, 3 were to make a home run and 73 were to be recaptured all through Germany. Of the 73 captured, 50 were to be murdered on the direct orders of Adolf Hitler. Just outside the confines of the camp, we find the monument to the 50 men who were murdered as a result of the Great Escape.
Walking in the footsteps of heroes. Battlefield tours by Leisure Holidays, sponsors of history.